Hello. Today we have to talk about three things. The first is the notion that we have to do something about the brainwashed public. No, we don't. Trump got his landslide. Okay? The public is fine. The voters voted for Trump overwhelmingly. I know there's some survey out there saying that Biden won because of censorship and whatever the other one was. No, Biden was the beneficiary of the most widespread electoral cheating, electoral fraud in our country's history. So, if you don't accept that, then you're not living in the real world. So by accepting that survey, you are accepting that there was no cheating. So you need to put this whole notion of right wing, conservative censorship and all of that. You need to put that out of your mind, and you need to stop worrying about other people. As I've been telling you for a long time, um, Trump got his landslide. That means that Trump, those who follow in the footsteps of Trump, will do fine if we have fair and fraud-free elections. And I'll get to that later. So stop thinking about the voting public. The voters are fine. They chose Trump overwhelmingly, and so everything that you're hearing that caused Biden to win it's an attempt to brainwash you. So stop thinking about it. Trump got his message through despite everything. So the voting public is fine. Stop worrying about them. The second thing I'm hearing is from people who call themselves conservatives, but they are your enemies. They're telling you that Congress and the Supreme Court will save us from the worst of Joe Biden's, attempts to transform us. That's ridiculous. These people just, as of this second, successfully stole a national election, the presidential election. So that was the hardest thing they've ever done. And what everybody is doing is they want to be on the side of the winners. Now, the General Services Administration, the GSA, the reason it hadn't acknowledged Biden as a president-elect is that he's not the president-elect. But they were the victims of terrorism. And so Trump said, go ahead and do it. But he has no authority to tell them to go ahead with the transition. They were what they were doing was perfectly legal. What happened was that they were under such pressure, terroristic pressure, that they gave in, and Trump knows it doesn't matter. But this notion that Congress and the courts will save us from Biden is ridiculous. Stealing the national election, I mean, they're in the catbird seat unless this is reversed. Nothing else matters. They can do whatever they want. Biden is going to rule by fiat the way Obama did, and Congress won't do anything to stop him. So what you're hearing from these people calling themselves conservatives is their gratitude at returning to the status quo, where they get to write books the way Ann Coulter does and not affect any change. They get rich, and you are conditioned to accept words over actions. And as long as Coulter says the right things, then you're in love with her. But Coulter is your enemy. Coulter lied about Trump. She gave a speech at Austin University, and she said that we're lucky that Trump was out because he was going to go full leftist in his second term. It's a flat out lie. The people telling you that, everything's fine because Congress and, blah, 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 they're your enemies. If Biden is sworn in, then that's the end. It's real. Because they'll have overcome the greatest hurdle they had, which is how to steal a national election. So from that point on, the reason they didn't manage to steal the various they did steal some Senate seats, but and of course they stole House seats, but Congress doesn't matter anymore. Ruling by fiat is the only thing, and nobody would stop Biden's puppeteers from basically enforcing whatever agenda they want. So you have to keep that in mind too, that this can't stand because it's the end of the country. It is. And anyone who tells you otherwise is your enemy. Now, the third thing we need to talk about is how Trump prepared for this. And Trump prepared for this by winning the total and absolute loyalty of the armed forces. So let's look at what he did. He got them fully funded for the first time in 10 years. He fixed the VA, which nobody had ever done before. He created new benefits that allow them to live as they should have been living, the whole time we've had a volunteer armed forces. He got them new weapons. He withdrew them from these endless wars that were killing Americans for no reason that anybody could see. He granted he reorganized the armed forces so that tactical units are autonomous. In other words, generals can't mess up the fighting. They can't mess with the fighting men anymore. And he listened to what the armed forces said they needed. So, I have no idea what, everybody's written off the Justice Department and the FBI and all that. It's too premature. But the people we know who are completely loyal to Donald Trump are the armed forces. So the people who Trump trusted to expose all this are the armed forces. And we have the capabilities, and Trump was able to authorize military action because this was essentially a foreign and domestic attack on our national security. So the armed forces aren't going to arrest anyone. You need to like understand how things work. All they need is to have the evidence of what happened. And presenting that evidence to the Supreme Court and then to the public will blow up absolutely everything. The ramifications are such that we can't even calculate them. But Steve Bannon said that Trump plans on shaking up everything almost to the point of destruction. And this is going to do that. So when presented with this evidence, the Supreme Court will nullify the results of the election except for the results that can be proven, and that gives Trump his landslide. And after that is when we're going to see arrests and all those things. But you're not quite understanding what the most important part of this is, which is to expose it. And what happens after that? What happens after that? In a very real sense. I mean, I know you're talking about you need to see orange jumpsuits. The country needs to see orange jumpsuits. All of that. This is bigger than any individual. And after this is exposed, then they're all powerless. They're all dead in the water. And Trump has the authority to confiscate the assets of all these people. So, I mean, if you're still stuck on the idea that we have to have trials or else the American people will lose their confidence in the justice system, you don't get it. That many trials of that many high-level politicians would go on for decades. That's just reality. We can't tie up all of the we can't tie up the whole Justice Department and everything in order to get that one man or that one woman who you want gotten. You really do need to put your own personal desires behind you and start thinking of the country. And the point is exposing all of this and robbing all of these people of everything. And then what happens to them after that is, in a sense, immaterial. We don't know what's going to happen, but I mean, you're demanding that we basically tie up the entire federal court system for decades. That's what you're demanding, and this is not reasonable. This is much bigger than the people you want to get. So first, Trump has to expose all of this. Then we have to see the fallout, and then we see what's going to happen to the individuals involved in this. So you need to stop thinking about the so-called brainwashed public, because they're not. They voted for Trump overwhelmingly. You need to stop listening to all the people who you used to listen to, because they are your enemies, unless they are willing to come right out and say that this election was fraudulent. They are your enemies. We can't let this pass, all right? And you have to have faith in the armed forces, because they're the ones who got the evidence. This thing was so big that A, Trump had a massive um, counterattack in place, and B, when Trump exposes all of this, everything worldwide changes. Everything. So, for once, listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. Stop talking about the things you've been talking about for 5 straight years. Stop thinking about them. All right? Um, you, with all due respect, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Um, we've never had a cataclysm the size of what's coming, but it's a good cataclysm. It's a flood that washes away everything corrupt and criminal. And you know, you need to start thinking in the post exposure. Uh, 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 you need to recalibrate your mindset to the post exposure world. So do not waste any time thinking about things that in the big picture don't matter, because this is not a time to be, you know, small minded. This is a time to be big picture people. And the American public overwhelmingly chose Trump. And that was a massive victory. And Trump, I am positive, used the armed forces to get everything he needed to expose this election fraud. There's no doubt they would have leapt at the chance. And, you know, as you saw today, when Trump pardoned the turkey, he's happy, he's cheerful, and everything he's doing and saying indicates that he's going to get a second term. Believe him, he's going to get a second term. Click.